Okay, we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Tony Wilkin-Givart. I am Executive Director of Midwest Environmental Advocates. And today I'm joined by a number of speakers who will share their perspective on the lawsuit filed by Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce against the Department of Natural Resources. This lawsuit by WMC is designed to gut the spills law, a bedrock environmental protection that has protected the health of Wisconsin communities for over 40 years. We're gathered here this morning because in less than an hour, the Waukesha Circuit Court will hear our client's motion to intervene and participate in this case. So to tell you more about this, I want to turn the floor over to a member of Midwest Environmental Advocates Board of Directors, Trisha Zunker.
Thank you, Tony. My name is Trisha Zunker. I am a law professor and member of the Board of Directors of Midwest Environmental Advocates. I also serve my people, the Ho-Chunk Nation, as Associate Justice on the Ho-Chunk Supreme Court. Midwest Environmental Advocates is a nonprofit law center that combines the power of law with the resolve of communities facing environmental injustice to secure and protect the rights of all people to healthy water, land, and air. This morning, I am speaking to you from my community, Wausau, Wisconsin. You will hear today how WMC's reckless lawsuit to strip the state of the power to address PFAS and other forms of toxic contamination will have harmful and costly ramifications for communities across the state, from Milwaukee to Marinette to my hometown of Wausau. Midwest Environmental Advocates attorney Rob Lee is also here in Wausau this morning, where he will be appearing virtually before the Waukesha County Circuit Court on behalf of all our clients. Appearing in court with Attorney Lee, again virtually, will be Terry Killian and Tom Killian and other members of Citizens for a Clean Wausau. In addition to Citizens for a Clean Wausau, Midwest Environmental Advocates is representing 4 other clients in this hearing today: Wisconsin Environmental Health Network, River Alliance of Wisconsin, Clean Water Action of Northeast Wisconsin, and Doug Oetzinger, a resident of Marinette and a former mayor of that city. Each of our clients would be directly harmed if WMC's lawsuit is successful in undermining the spills laws, the only legal tool the state currently has to order cleanup of PFAS, the toxic chemicals found in Teflon, firefighting foam, and other products. MEA will be urging the court to allow these directly impacted individuals and groups to participate in the lawsuit in order to defend the health of Wisconsin communities. You will hear from some of them today about what's at stake and why the outcome of this case should be a concern for all of us who care about public health and clean water. We'll now hear from Alison Warner, Executive Director of River Alliance of Wisconsin.
Thank you, Trisha. My name is Alison Warner. I'm the Executive Director of the River Alliance of Wisconsin, a statewide nonprofit organization that has been empowering people to protect and restore water for more than 25 years. River Alliance has a membership of more than 1,500 individuals, businesses, and local watershed groups. Many of our members have made significant investments in advocating for the cleanup of Wisconsin's waterways. WMC's assault on the spills law is a significant threat to the state's ability to protect those waterways. It is also a threat to public health and to all the sectors of our economy, including tourism and agriculture that rely on clean water. Wisconsin's spills law makes common sense and is grounded in what we all learned in kindergarten. If you make a mess, you are responsible for cleaning it up. Put another way, no one has a right to contaminate our water. Business owners in particular have an ethical responsibility to understand their operations well enough to know how their use of a hazardous substance could impact the health and safety of their community. Under the law, the definition of a hazardous substance is intentionally broad and comprehensive. It has to be for 2 big reasons. First, rivers, lakes, and especially groundwater are extremely expensive to clean up once they are contaminated. The Department of Natural Resources must be able to quickly and effectively contain a spill. Secondly, there are many substances that are not problematic under normal circumstances, but are hazardous in other circumstances. For example, Manure from cows can be applied to fields as fertilizer. However, if thousands of gallons of manure spill into a stream, it is a hazard that could kill thousands of fish, make the stream unusable for recreation, and potentially contaminate the drinking water wells of nearby families. The particular family of hazardous substances at issue in this lawsuit are PFAS, also known as forever chemicals, which have been linked to cancer and other serious health effects. If WMC prevails, however, the implications could be much broader. The state would be limited in its ability to act quickly to address all sorts of hazardous contamination. That's because DNR would be required to go through a complicated rulemaking process for each hazardous substance before investigating and cleaning up contamination. That process is notoriously prone to political interference and could drag on for years. In the meantime, you and I would be on the hook for the cleanup instead of those who are responsible. We want to make sure that does not happen. Together with our partners, River Alliance of Wisconsin will continue to work to protect the health of our water resources and the communities who depend on them.
Thank you so much, Alison. Thank you for your partnership. I'd next like to invite Doug Oetzinger to speak.
Good morning. My name is Doug Oetzinger. I'm the former mayor of the city of Marinette and a current alderman on its city council. I'm also a member of a local PFAS community group called Save Our Water, or SOH2O. My community has been devastated by PFAS contamination stemming from Tyco fire products, firefighting foam, manufacturing and testing and training operations. The people of Marinette and Peshtigo area have had their wells poisoned, local fish and game health advisories issued, and the degradation of our natural surroundings, especially the waters of the Bay of Green Bay. I am seeking to participate in this lawsuit because the assistance that the DNR is providing Marinette and Peshtigo to investigate and clean up the contamination is entirely dependent on the spills law. We became aware of PFAS contamination of our groundwater and private wells in 2017. And within a year, we learned that it was also in our surface water, in our wastewater, and in our biosolids that had been spread on agricultural fields for decades. We had become one of the largest PFAS contamination sites in America. Yet our community had never heard of PFAS or realized that this poisonous compound was routinely and carelessly released into our environment practically every week. PFAS is a 100% man-made compound. It does not exist in nature. If it is found in your drinking water, if it is found in the environment, it is there because it was put there by the use of PFAS in man-made products. We are increasingly aware that the same unique chemical properties that make PFAS useful in manufacturing also make them highly toxic to human health. Exposure to these chemicals, even at very low levels, has been linked to serious health problems, including an increased risk for certain cancers. Those who are responsible for putting PFAS into our environment must be held accountable. In my experience, the work of holding corporate polluters accountable is not easy. You would think that once the danger has been revealed, that a good corporation would step up to the plate and take ownership of the problem. But that is not the case. Corporate polluters practice a strategy of the 4 Ds: deny, delay, deflect, and deceive. The idea that the spills law could be gutted and that we would return to a time when polluters weren't held accountable for cleaning up the contaminated soil and water, that's unthinkable. Unfortunately, that's what's at stake in this lawsuit. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you for your advocacy on behalf of your community. I'd next like to invite Tom Killian of Citizens for a Clean Wausau to speak with us.
Good morning. My name is Tom Killian. I'm a founding member of Citizens for a Clean Wausau. I'm joined today by Gary Gisselman, Bruce Grau, Lon Groth, Rita Pockel, Randy Radke, and Terry Killian of CCW. CCW is a watchdog group of volunteers formed to monitor the activities and impacts of current and past polluters. We believe that citizens have the right to access important information about the environment in which they live, and that it is the government's duty to enforce environmental laws in order to protect all residents. The outcome of this lawsuit could have implications for virtually every community in the state, not just those facing PFAS contamination. The city of Wausau and its citizens are directly impacted by the DNR's ability to regulate hazardous contamination under the spills law. Wausau's diverse working class neighborhoods that have been disproportionately impacted by industrial contamination are particularly reliant on the DNR's ability to require investigation and cleanup from responsible parties. In fact, the city of Wausau's EPA Brownfields Planning Grant application highlighted in great detail that the proximity to contamination in brownfields for people of color and low-income residents presented, quote, socioeconomic and health concerns for sensitive populations. The DNR maintains a comprehensive online database that provides information on contaminated properties and other cleanup and redevelopment activities in Wisconsin. There are 24 open sites within the Wausau city limits listed in that database. There are also 520 closed sites listed. Many of those have elevated levels of residual industrial contamination, and the responsible parties have continuing obligations overseen by DNR. DNR's authority to investigate and order cleanup of those sites comes from the spills law. Without the spills law, we'd have no legal recourse for holding polluters accountable. Everyday people would be forced to figure out how to deal with soil and water contamination on their own.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you to Citizens for a Clean Wausau and for hosting Rob this morning to present the oral argument. So we had scheduled Richard Diaz, chairperson of Coalition on Lead Emergency. He's not able to be here this morning, unfortunately, for unforeseen circumstances. I wanted to just summarize some of the points that he would have made. And Cole is not one of the groups that is seeking to participate in the lawsuit, but it does support and advocates for a host of environmental issues support defense of the spills law. The lead contamination issue is another aspect of what is at stake with defense of the spills law. As many know, the lead contamination crisis in Milwaukee and other areas of Wisconsin is a public health emergency. And of course, we need more tools to keep children safe, not fewer. The spills law is critical because it empowers DNR to ensure that those responsible for lead contamination in soil investigate it and clean it up. And research shows that lead in soil is a major exposure pathway for children living in urban communities, especially children in lower income families, children of color, and others in urban areas that are the site of former industrial uses. And that's why this attack on the spills law is an attack on environmental justice. For over 40 years, the spills law has been key to protecting public health by ensuring cleanup at thousands of sites of industrial contamination and other toxic discharges that tend to be or are disproportionately located in lower income neighborhoods and in communities of color. And in fact, in Milwaukee, there are over 100 sites where the spills law is actively being used to address soil contamination involving lead in places like public parks and neighborhoods and schools. And so, as you've heard today, this lawsuit would require DNR to go through a complicated rulemaking process that is notoriously prone to political interference and that could drag on for years before the state could use the spills law as it has for the last 4 decades. And the lead crisis that we're facing across the state actually shows what happens when we give polluters a free pass while their lobbyists and lawyers obstruct the passage of public health protections. Medical professionals knew that lead was poisonous to children. Lead-containing products were a hazard in the very early part of the 1900s. Still, it was not until 1978 that lead was banned from paint. And as a result, millions of children have been poisoned. Again, this is an example of why we should not be going backwards and that we should not allow this attempt to rob the state of the power to protect public health and address toxins in the environment, including lead contamination in soil. And to speak to issues in a similar vein, we're really glad to be joined by Dr. Beth Neary, who is the co-president of Wisconsin Environmental Health Network. Beth, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tony. My name is Dr. Beth Neary. I'm a pediatrician. I've spent my career educating families about the importance of minimizing kids' exposure to harmful environmental toxins like lead and PFAS. In my role as co-president of Wisconsin Environmental Health Network, I also work to educate policymakers about the need for strong environmental protections that help keep Wisconsin's children safe. Simply put, WEN's request to intervene in this case is about protecting public health, especially that of our most vulnerable, our children. Toxic substances like lead and PFAS threaten the health of all who are exposed to them, but it's infants, the developing fetus, and small children who are most at risk. The reason for that is that children are smaller, so they drink more water in proportion to their size. Their brains and organs are growing rapidly. Their immune system is still developing, and they have a longer life to accumulate toxins. As opposed to adults who eat a variety of food, infants only consume formula and breast milk for the first 6 months of their life. So if the water's contaminated, or if the breast milk is, that's 100% of that child's diet. We know that children have a higher body burden of PFAS and a greater blood concentration as compared with adults. In addition, recent studies have shown negative effects on the immune system of children, specifically a decreased response to vaccines. What does that mean in the long term? It can have long-term effects such as future infections for those children as adults, the risk of autoimmune disease, and the risk of cancer. We know from studies that the C8 study, which was the most comprehensive longitudinal study for adverse health effects of PFAS, identified 6 diseases associated with PFAS: high cholesterol, ulcerative colitis, thyroid toxicity, testicular and kidney cancer, preeclampsia, and elevated blood pressure during pregnancy. Given the serious threat to our children, the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources must use all the tools at its disposal to identify and clean up sources of toxic contamination rapidly and not be bogged down in long legal disputes which just poison another generation of children. In summary, the spills law protects the health of all Wisconsinites from harmful effects of many toxicants such as PFAS and other emerging and unregulated compounds. Because of the spills law, the DNR is providing bottled water to the people in Marinette, Pestigo, La Crosse, and other communities devastated by PFAS contamination. And it's paid for by the polluters, not the state of Wisconsin citizens. If this law is undermined, the required well testing, cleanup, and remediation would end. And without it, it would take years of legislation, again exposing another generation of children to this pollutant. In addition, the cost of the cleanup would be on the citizens of Wisconsin. Wisconsin would be forced back into the dark ages of environmental protection. We owe it to our children to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neary. So that concludes our prepared remarks, and we would be happy to answer any questions from members of the media. You can type your question in the question and answer feature. I see that Chris Hubeck has his hand raised, and actually I think I can allow you to talk, Chris, so I will do that. Go ahead, Chris. You're
Hi,
on
can you
mute
hear
right
me?
now. There you go. I can.
Okay, hi, thanks for having this. Are you concerned that the state is either unable or unwilling to defend this law?
We believe and know that the state is defending the law in court. But I think it's important for the court and members of the public to realize that this is not an arcane legal dispute about agency authority. This is about the real life health consequences of Wisconsin communities across our state. And those interests are represented by the interveners that are seeking to participate in the case today. So Danielle Kading has a question in the chat from WPR. She asked, what would it mean if your motion is denied by the court? So Danielle, we have two motions. One is to participate as full parties, as interveners in the case. If that motion were denied, then we would not be allowed to participate as such. We have an alternative motion to submit amicus briefs and to be able to renew our motion to participate as full parties if circumstances change as the litigation proceeds. If the motion for intervention were denied, but that motion granted, we would avail ourselves of that opportunity and make our arguments and present our case to the best extent possible, and be ready to renew the motion to intervene if circumstances were to change. If that motion were denied, and I don't expect that it will, but if it were, we would continue to monitor this case, and we would continue to look for opportunities to participate as it proceeds. And we would continue to raise awareness with the media and members of the public about what is at stake. Any other questions? And Hannah, let me know if there are any on Facebook. And if anyone wants to add to the two questions that I responded to, you're of course more than welcome. Okay. Without the spill, this is from Laura Schulte, without the spills law, would there be any way to hold polluters accountable? And so Laura, the answer to that question depends on what contaminant we are talking about. If the spills law were rendered ineffective through this lawsuit, the state would lose a major tool and a major bedrock environmental protection. And as it relates to PFAS in particular, the spills law is the only currently existing regulatory tool that any government has to address PFAS contamination. And therefore, there would essentially be no way in the interim to hold polluters accountable until other laws might be developed on the federal or state level, which the timeline for that is uncertain. Danielle Kading asks, are you aware of similar challenges to state and environmental regulators' authority to conduct environmental remediation related to PFAS in other states? Nothing comes to mind specifically for me. Does anyone else on the panel aware of similar challenges in other states? I think we have seen industry be very aggressive in our state in particular, in litigation strategies and lobbying strategies to undermine longstanding environmental protections. And WMC is a driving force behind that effort. So I would not be surprised if we are unique in that regard, Danielle. Julian Emerson is asking about the adoption of PFAS standards just recently. And I don't know that I know exactly what Julian is referring to. So Julian, if you want to talk, if you want to request to talk, we could have a little bit more of a conversation. I do know that there is a federal rulemaking process that is ongoing, that is expected to take many years, and that it has several steps. So there may have been a step that was completed yesterday. Okay, Julian, go ahead.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I wish I knew more. I just saw a story. I'm not very familiar with it, but I just saw a story yesterday about some kind of the federal government finally adopting some kind of federal standards for PFAS guidelines and regulations. And so I don't know a lot about it. It was a very brief tidbit of a story I saw. So maybe it's something that's just emerging or just happening. I just was hoping you knew about it. And when I saw that, as I think about this, it makes me wonder, that's always been one of the hangups is there's that WMC and others point to is there's no federal standard. So why are you guys trying to regulate this? And I'm wondering if federal guidelines really are adopted and they do adopt some federal standards, would that then help your guys' case?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the reason DNR is using the spills law to protect Wisconsin families from PFAS is because it has the legislative authority to do so. And it has for 40 years to address hazardous substances that are released into the environment and causing harm to human health. That's what WMC is attacking. I can look into what you might be referring to and get back to you later today. I think it's safe to say, since a lot of us on the call here follow these events very closely, there weren't any enforceable federal standards that were promulgated yesterday that would address sites of contamination in Wisconsin. I suspect that perhaps there was another procedural step that moved forward yesterday or recently. Does anyone else have anything to add?
Can I add something?
Yes.
So what's important to know is there are what they call emerging contaminants that are not regulated yet. They know that they're harmful. They just haven't gotten down to making the regulations. So the EPA actually has a health advisory for PFAS, but it doesn't have any teeth in it. So the fact that it's not regulated just is an example of how the federal levels get bogged down in, polluters pushing back and things like that. That's why you see states like Minnesota and Michigan, our neighboring states, they've taken the lead and they've actually set standards for PFAS because the federal government just takes too long. And if we take longer, it's just more people are going to be exposed to the contaminant. The contaminant's already there. So that's what the spills law gives us, the flexibility and the ability to say, it's there, let's do something about it. Let's not wait 30 months to get bogged down in legal disputes.
Thank you, Beth. Doug, you have your hand up?
Yeah. I see the questions. Well, what if the spills law went away and what would the process be? And the process, what WMC is trying to do is make everything go through the formal rulemaking process to identify and regulate these emerging contaminants. Well, the DNR has been working on two of the PFAS compounds, PFOA and PFOS, since 2018. It's like a 3-year process on a good day. So thinking about the Marinette and Peshtigo area when we discovered this, people would have been drinking the poisoned water for a minimum of 3 more years before the DNR would have had the power to say bottled water to anyone who's got a contaminated well. Stop dumping it into the sanitary sewer. Stop dumping it into the Bay of Green Bay. And the rulemaking process, as was mentioned by one of our speakers, is such a rigged system right now that even as the DNR goes through the formal process of setting the rules, it gets in front of the legislature and they can override it. So it's a game that the WMC is playing. You shouldn't try to do anything unless we have a rule on it. Oh, and when you try to make a rule, we'll stop it in the legislature. So the only thing that we have to protect us in Marinette and Peshtigo right now is the spills law. That's the authority that forced the responsible party, in our case, Tyco, to provide bottled water and systems to treat the water in private wells. That's the law that's telling them that you can't keep dumping this into the bay. Without that spills law, we would have no protection, and people would be relying on individual lawsuits, which, you know, are you going to live long enough to see the result from that? So if the spills law goes away, it will be a disaster for individuals, for property owners, for the health and safety of our children, which was mentioned, everybody, and of course, it's damaging the environment on top of it. So this lawsuit is critically important for us to be participants in. This is not theoretical for me. I'm living with this contamination. My community is living with this contamination, and the spills law is the only thing that's protecting us. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. And we do have a hard stop here because the court hearing starts at 9 o'clock. So I want to excuse definitely Attorney Lee and the folks in Wausau so that they can get ready to appear at the court hearing, which is coming up in just 10 minutes. I know there are a few questions that we haven't been able to get to, and we can stay on just to make sure that folks are getting answers. So I want to just, Doug just talked a little bit about Chris Hubbock's question about the process that the state would have to go through. Chris, if you have other questions or would like more comment on that, please reach out to us this morning. And then just to circle back to Julian's question about federal action. So I'm told that Wednesday, the EPA announced plans to regulate wastewater and to, for the first time, set limits on some PFAS compounds in wastewater that certain manufacturers and users of chemical compounds are discharging for, so for industrial users. And that is, again, just the announcement of plans to promulgate those regulations. And then there was also this week preliminary work on regulations related to sewage treatment systems. Again, this is the long regulatory process that we shouldn't have to wait for in Wisconsin, because the people of Wisconsin have already empowered the DNR to respond to hazardous substances to protect their health. And then, let's see, are there any other questions? Oh, there's a question from Danielle about how do we as a group respond to WMC's claims that this creates uncertainty for businesses that are conducting environmental remediation when no state or federal standards have been put in place. Basically arguments like, how do they know what's hazardous enough to clean up if there are no standards? And so I think first it's important to point out that this law and the way it works is as simple as Alison said earlier. If you're making a mess, if you're discharging something dangerous into the environment, you have to report it. And if there's an investigation that shows that you are the responsible party and that the contaminant is in the environment, you have to clean it up. And the process of cleanup involves the dialogue between DNR and the responsible party to put those plans in place. So there is certainty, and DNR is telling those who have discharged hazardous substances into the environment exactly what they have to do. The certainty that we need is certainty for Wisconsin families, for children, for parents, that polluters are not being given a free pass, that the laws that have protected us for the last 40 years will continue to safeguard the health of Wisconsin communities. So I think it is very much about the potential for uncertainty, and the certainty that we need is that the state will be empowered to protect our health. Okay, well, we've
Tony,
gone
can
a little
I
bit over. Is there anything else?
Can I just add one thing, Tony?
Please, Beth.
So I think the issue that you're getting at is that there's no regulation. Regulations lag. So there's evidence in the scientific literature for years and years and years about many of these toxicants, but regulation takes so long. So that's an important point, and we need to respond quickly.
Thank you. Really grateful that everyone came together today. Thank you to members of the media. We had a really good showing for an early press conference, so we appreciate your attention to this story and your reporting on it. If you have any follow-up questions, reach out to Peg Schaefer here at MEA or me, and we'd be happy to get you the answers that you need today. Thanks very much.